Episode 13, Take 2.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Environmental Podcast. Aaron, how's it going?
It's going really well. Excited to record tonight. This is our first ever late night recording.
Yep.
Just because we've had
A series of unfortunate events this weekend.
yeah, and where are we recording right now?
We had to hide in my bedroom because my apartment flooded.
No, you mean what you should say is because the regular studio is under renovations.
Yes, the regular studio is under renovations due to a pipe bursting and really noisy machines
Yeah.
dehumidifying the studio.
So it's kind of intimate. It's kind of an intimate recording session.
Okay.
You had a busy day. You had a big presentation to give for one of your classes.
I did, yeah. So my first class today, each class a different student presents on the readings that were assigned for this week. It's a class about ecology and the environment. So I got to present about Christianity and the environment. And it was really interesting, like 20 minutes. I think it went very well.
Is that what this episode's about? You're going to give the presentation again?
Yes, exactly. Gonna take you through the Bible from Genesis to Revelation.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that would take more than 20 minutes, but that would be a cool episode series we could maybe one day do.
Maybe.
But for today, we wanted to start something new,
Yeah.
which is something we've been thinking about for a while, which is we're going to start doing biographical episodes.
Yeah, so what kind of made us want to do this was when we were discussing the person of the decade. We were kind of going through, and we were also looking at a bunch of just different artists we liked, and we were like, wouldn't it be cool just to like focus on different people, may they be biologists or artists,
scientists,
kind of,
artists, living, dead, politicians,
yeah,
whoever, because I guess in kind of analyzing specific vessels for the human experience, we can learn more.
yeah,
You know,
seeing
especially
people's like morning routines, that was interesting.
Sure. Like learning things about them which transcend their own field, I think is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, for sure.
On that note, today's drumroll episode, you've already seen it because of the title of the episode.
It's Rachel Carson.
Yes.
You may be wondering, who is Rachel Carson? That's what we're here to show you or tell you.
So she is a really important 20th century, she was a really important 20th century ecologist. And she wrote some books which are widely considered to have been very foundational to the current, to the modern environmental movement, yes.
Yes. So in her early years, she was born in 1907. Her mom kind of instilled in her a real passion for the environment. And she went to university and studied marine biology, then got a master's, and her master's was in zoology.
What's zoology?
It's the study of just animals.
Okay.
Biology is animals and plants.
And everything.
Yeah.
Fungi.
So that's kind of her background. She grew up in a town called Springdale, Pennsylvania.
Interesting.
Which we were discussing sounds like something from a movie.
Yeah.
Like it'd be like a fake setting, Springdale.
It's very naturey though, right?
Yeah, I really like the name of the place. So she grew up there, and then when she graduated, she was hired by the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries to write little scripts for...
Little radio scripts.
Yeah.
Was that during World War I?
Yes.
Okay.
So at the time, a lot of people were kind of doing different things than what they were kind of originally studied to be,
course,
or like
because
trained
they
to be.
needed all hands on deck, I guess.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting writing radio scripts. And on top of that, she was writing articles on natural history to be published in a local newspaper or magazine. I don't know what it was. But yeah, so that's kind of her background.
So she studied marine biology. That was her undergrad.
Yeah.
I considered studying marine biology. Instead of, not alongside environmental science, but in place of it. Our school has a really good looking marine biology program. A nice building and seems like a good experience.
I feel like when people study the ocean, they like gain this deeper understanding of the natural world that like we have no idea about.
What do you mean?
And I know it's kind of like really out there.
When I think about it, when I picture like a marine biologist, a marine biology student, they seem like the people who are like really into nature.
Yeah.
Like they have this kind of spirituality, like they just seem like they're operating on a higher plane of understanding and connection.
No, that's what I was like, kind of what I was saying.
Yeah.
It's like we know about trees, we know about like land animals, but like the ocean's so vast.
Yeah. One of my favorite teachers in environmental science studied coral reefs, and she has given lectures about it to us. I think it's because it's so alien. Most of the aquatic phenomena is because we all grew up on land and we've all seen it. There's nothing that really surprises us or even like wows us, maybe to the extent that ocean stuff does sometimes.
No, for sure.
The guy who created SpongeBob was also a marine biologist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Rachel Carson.
Anyway, so after she was kind of doing the radio scripts during the war, she was hired to be a scientist and editor for another U.S. like agency.
Yeah, the Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yeah. So she would write like pamphlets and do research for them. Mm-hmm. She was eventually promoted to be editor-in-chief, and she worked there for 15 years. And kind of during that time, she started compiling her research and turning it into
books.
Okay.
Yeah. So, compiling it into longer form collections, I guess, or encyclopedias.
Yeah, they were called Under the Sea Wind.
Under the Sea Wind?
The Sea Around Us, and The Edge of the Sea.
Ooh, so they're all about the ocean.
Yes.
3 volumes.
Mm-hmm.
Just talking about cool marine science she found interesting and relevant.
Yeah, so those were published. A lot of her work she published in like journals first.
Yeah, of course.
So in like little installments, then she compiled them.
Yeah, I dig that.
Yeah, those 3 books were between 1941 and 1955.
Neat.
She called them a biography of the ocean.
Wow.
Yeah.
So pretty comprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to read those.
Yeah. They kind of got her into the public consciousness as the person who like just loved the ocean. Yeah. All of the books are very informative, but apparently I haven't read them all. They have like kind of an undertone of conservation and that we need to take care of the environment.
I mean, I feel like it would be hard to write books like that if you didn't feel that way.
It'd
probably be hard to write books like that. I mean, you obviously have a passion for the natural world and for learning about it, curiosity, and you probably feel a sense of responsibility and protection, especially if, as you said, she was becoming kind of a public figure for it. Oh, but you're saying they weren't just...
These weren't this isn't why she was famous for conservation yet.
Right, you were saying they weren't just informational, though. There was an
underlying message. Yeah, okay. Theme. And up until this point in the 50s, there wasn't, like, environmentalism wasn't in the public consciousness at all, really. It was just, like, after the war, there were a few things kind of focusing on pollution, like water pollution and stuff, but...
Nuclear
a little bit, yeah.
Right.
But not too much.
No, because people were full steam ahead with that.
Yeah, people were just innovating, growing, expanding. Yeah, so there were those 3 books. And then she did a bunch of other articles, and she had a few books about, like, kids' education.
Okay.
And kind of making kids appreciate
the environment. Do you mean kids textbooks or books about education?
It was Help Your Child to Wonder was one of them.
Okay, so a bit of both.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's like kind of a combo. Another one, which was just like a kid's book, I think, and it's called Ever-Changing Shore.
Wow.
So that's kind of neat. She did like really hardcore textbooks about her research and then branched into saying, hey, we need to educate the kids.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is kind of a lot of people's progression of thought.
I was going to say, I think a lot of people make that, tread that path in academia, especially for something they're really passionate about. She probably started to see the most important thing here is to teach the next generation and instill these ethics into them.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of her academic life, her publishing life.
Mm-hmm.
And then towards the end of her life, she kind of became known as for more advocacy work.
Yes. So from 1954 to 1962, she just started doing a ton of research on the impacts of DDT. Okay. What's DDT, Aaron?
The pesticides which they were all using post World War II, right?
Yeah. So
for Let me try and get this. Let me try and remember this from first and second year classes. There was a green revolution.
There was.
Which meant that pesticides and artificial fertilizers became really widespread, adopted as they wanted to grow a lot more food, and they started to grow a lot more food through the use of these things, and they were spraying it all over the place. Yeah,
and then the war came, and kind of those resources were halted from expanding.
Okay.
But then after the wars, all these resources became available again, plus everyone was really excited the war was over, and so they were spraying the stuff everywhere, and it got a lot of use in subdivisions to try and they would clear cut areas and they would spray herbicides, DDT everywhere.
Right, it wasn't just in agricultural places, it was all over the place.
Yeah, on your lawns, I feel like I've seen some really crazy advertisements about just personal use of it.
Yeah.
But they had no idea what it was or what it would do. But Rachel Carson had a hunch that spraying this stuff, the word is probably 10 syllables long, the actual...
What, for DDT?
Yeah.
Deca?
No, it's diametha...
Okay.
Something.
Look that one up.
I will. Anyway, so what she kind of found about DDT, you can go on, you know how it compiles ecosystems?
Accumulation.
Yes.
Magnification. You mean inside organisms?
Yeah, so this is what she was researching.
Okay, so some little bug will be sprayed with DDT and it will go inside it a little bit, and then the bug's predator, maybe it's a bigger bug, will eat a bunch of those bugs, and so the amount of DDT in that one goes up, and then the predator of that bigger bug, maybe it's a frog, will eat a bunch of those bigger bugs, and then so on and so on along the food chain until it's actually a significant amount of DDT which is in the animals which are further along the food chain. That's right?
That's right.
And that happens with, I think it's called biomagnification or
bioaccumulation.
And that happens with other things as well, like plastics, ocean plastics.
Microplastics, yeah.
And other chemicals which can be found a lot. It happens a lot in fish, right? I like mercury. And that's why some fish, they recommend you only eat a little bit of it, especially pregnant women can't eat certain fish.
Tuna.
Yeah, because of the amount of mercury in it.
But there's a ton of chemicals and substances that bioaccumulate, and we don't know enough about the things we're adding to the world yet.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing.
I not read in class today. There was the stat, and it was something in the last 100 years we've introduced 20,000 new substances to the environment.
It's crazy.
That were just never there before, and it's we have no idea.
Yeah, we can talk about that with any topic. We've mentioned it in that there are so many things which literally we don't know the effect, what effect they have 70 years down the line, because they haven't been in existence that long, or they haven't been adopted for that long. So we're all kind of in a big experiment to see where things end up.
Yeah. But the thing about in the 50s and 60s, agriculture wasn't it's skyrocketed in the last 50 years, but people weren't really super aware of the runoff. So if you sprayed something on your crops, it's going to go into the water. If you spray something on your land, it's going to impact the whole ecosystem far beyond your farm or your subdivision. I found what DDT is.
Okay.
Do you want me to try and say it?
Yes. Try and sing it.
No. It's dichloro diphenyl trichloroethane.
DDT.
Yeah, that's one word that I just said. I don't know how many syllables that would be. It's not good.
Where do you stand on that kind of, if something sounds really chemically and unnatural, then it probably is unnatural and we shouldn't use it?
I don't think that's the case, because there's chemical names for
No,
everything.
I mean okay, if something's a molecule like that which is lab made and hasn't in the perfect world, are we still using things like that? Are they just better tested? Or are we just scrapping that kind of research and going back to the roots of agriculture and such?
It's hard to say.
Right, because it would sound like you're kind of swearing off science and progress.
Yeah. And I think if something was well enough tested, if they could do controlled experiments that would really predict what would happen in the real world, maybe, but I think we're pretty far off from being able to do that because the systems are complicated.
And especially because, as with, I don't know if it was the case in the 50s, but definitely in the future, if it's for agriculture, if it's to increase food yield, crop yield, they might not, no one wants to take time with that. People want to,
Yeah, we just need more food.
Yeah, exactly. If it's something that we need straight away, like, and we hear about it with like carbon sequestration methods, or what's it called? Geoengineering. Yeah, a lot of these cool techniques, which sound kind of sci-fi, which are being developed to try and halt climate change or prevent ecosystem collapse or things like this. I mean, it'll be tough to get a long period of controlled testing on those kind of things because scientists might feel that they are needed.
Yeah.
I mean, that might have been the case with DDT. I don't know. They might have said, we have this big economic boom. We need to support it.
No, I don't know too much about DDT besides like the impacts it had on the environment.
Yeah.
But anyway, so for 6 years, she did a ton of research on the impacts of DDT. She was looking at small communities and the impact it had on their ecosystems and things. And then in 1962, she published this book. Actually, it was published in 3 serial installments in The New Yorker, but then it was published as a book.
Okay.
And the book was called Silent Spring, and it was instantly a bestseller.
Right.
Which was the first environmentally based book, really, to be a bestseller.
Mm-hmm.
And another interesting thing was that when these were coming out in, like, serial, who was the president at the time?
In the 60s?
Yeah.
Nixon? Oh, you said early 60s.
Early 60s.
Truman.
Oh, okay.
I'm just guessing.
Let me see here.
I don't know. I'm just shouting out president names at this point. Obama?
Kennedy.
Okay.
Yeah, so he read it and he was like, we need to figure out if this is actually the case. We need to, like, get our scientists on this to make sure that, like, it's all legit. But it seemed really legit because she had done 6 years of research, but all of the DDT companies were, like, attacking her and be like, this is fake, you're lying. Yeah, so what she did was she, like, really examined, it was called, like, A Fable for Tomorrow, was kind of like the intro.
The book, you mean?
No, the book.
The series?
The chapter.
Okay.
The first chapter. And it used a bunch of examples from cities where DDT had already begun to bioaccumulate. And that's why the book was kind of the foundation for the modern environmental movement, because people were reading it. It really sparked a conversation about the impact of humans on the environment. Yeah. And I guess to kind of, like, go from there.
Very impressive.
We can go through, like, what the environmental movement kind of was from there until, like, when DDT was banned, I think is kind of an interesting way to go about it.
Okay. In 1972.
Yeah.
So about 10 years.
Yeah, the book was published in 62, and I guess we can kind of conclude. In 63, Carson
testified in Congress.
Yeah,
about
so, like,
the
Kennedy
effects of
called
DDT.
her in and said, hey, we need you to, like, tell these guys. Yeah. And so she was, called to Congress. She testified on, like, about the impacts of this, but she had breast cancer and died in 1964.
Yeah.
So, like, she was really reluctant to put so much time into something.
Like a public thing, you mean?
Yeah.
An advocacy thing, because she was more of a pure scientist, is my
More
understanding.
pure scientist, and also just pure joy. Out of, like, she just really loved nature. She didn't want it to be politicized.
But then that took on the role of stewardship.
Yeah. And she was like, well, I guess I'm best suited to bring attention to this.
And that's the image that we chose, or that we put together for this week's episode, let's say, on the Instagram, right? The graphic.
Yeah.
We've got a picture that we both saw online, and we kind of said, wow, which was her in Congress, because I think it's a really powerful picture. It's in black and white.
Yeah.
Just very defiant. And then with all the microphones and all the, she's the center of the frame. And then we just have a picture of some nature of where she grew up, something which she might have seen around where she grew up in Pennsylvania, which might have sparked a lot of interest, curiosity for her, which is some mountains. And then we kind of smushed the images together and said, look at this dichotomy.
Yeah.
And I that's one of the things that strikes me about her life, is that split. I think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Like her advocacy side and her just
learning about its side.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really beautiful for someone to be just hardworking in their passion, you know, writing books about it, writing pamphlets about it, doing research about the ocean. What did you call it? A biography of the ocean?
Yeah.
I think that's really awesome, just in itself. Because we don't hear a lot about that, because those aren't usually the people which are celebrated. So I guess in a way, her, I know you said those books were kind of popular, but not as popular as Silent Spring and the advocacy. Yeah. So in a way, that end of her life thing kind of brought more eyes to the unassuming scientific side.
Yeah.
I guess, which is what I find cool.
Yeah. I really like celebrating people who just kind of did their work humbly and kind of like quietly, because I feel like those people do deserve celebration. Yeah,
of course. Especially when it's for something like the environment.
Yeah.
Which is something, and it's, you know, writing kids' books, especially when it seems they prioritized disseminating that information, publishing it, letting other people know about it, because it's a topic which we obviously think is important for us all to know more about.
Yeah.
And it seems like she was trailblazing.
She definitely was.
Yeah. I think tracing her impact to where we are today is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And you said that's what we wanted to do next.
Yeah. So I was just I found a really great article on American Experience. Ooh. I don't know what website this is, but I found it and I thought it was a really great article.
Okay.
So it goes from World War II to the modern day, tracing the environmental movement. And you can see a massive turning with the life of Rachel Carson.
Yeah.
So after her death in 1964, there was kind of 10 years of pretty slow progress, but 1968 was when the Apollo 8 landed on the moon, or like took the first picture of Earth.
Earthrise in 68, and then they landed on the moon in April 69. Yeah.
So Earthrise was this picture of the Earth.
Yeah, that changed a lot of changed a lot of perspectives. I think that might have been in 69 actually as well, or maybe late 68.
December 24th. 68.
Yeah. That changed. That I've heard people talk about that, and they're like, Earthrise was a big deal because like we can't fathom it because we've grown up in a time where we constantly have a 24/7 live stream of the International Space Station.
But the idea that like Earth had limits shook people.
Yeah,
like they were like,
they knew it, but seeing it is so different. Like imagine having never seen a picture of the planet before. It's crazy.
Yeah.
That's also, as a side comment, that's why I'm so impressed by 2001: A Space Odyssey, the sci-fi movie from 1968, because it came out and the space sequences are still incredibly. This is before like very little CGI. None of that is all practical effects, and they hadn't seen a picture of the Earth yet, and yet the pictures of the Earth are pretty convincing, and every other space sequence is really convincing. And I just had to get that Stanley Kubrick plug in there. Of course, he faked the moon landing a year later.
Honestly, after watching 2001, I was like...
You believe it?
I was.
That's why. That's where that rumor came from.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the 60s, you said there wasn't much in the way of legislature against DDT?
Yeah. Well, there was nothing against DDT.
In the 60s, they were doing other stuff.
Yeah, there was Environmental Species Protection Act.
Yeah, it was a huge... Well, the whales with Greenpeace.
Yeah, Greenpeace was founded, wasn't it?
Yeah, and because of Save the Whales, that was the huge thing. The 60s was a huge period of social change.
But then the 70s rolled around. And 71, not too much. But in 1970...
So what do you mean?
Sorry.
71, nothing happened.
What do I get? 1970, January.
Okay.
The first Earth Day.
Really?
Yeah, so 68, after they saw Earthrise, the president, I think it was Nixon then.
Yes.
He said... He hired this 25-year-old college student and was like, you need to spread awareness about the Earth.
Okay.
And they did so. People thought it was like this... People were kind of like really hesitant about it. They thought it was some kind of communist scheme.
Still could have been.
It still could have been.
No, it wasn't.
No. But
so that was in January?
That was in January.
I wonder why they moved it from January to... When's Earth Day now? March?
Oh, wait, no. This is the months leading up to... Earth Day. It is in April.
April, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. But that's when they started planning the first Earth Day and like
that's when it came into creation.
Yes.
Okay. So we're moving on from Rachel Carson a little bit.
A little bit, just to get to the year when DDT was.
Okay.
April 22nd, 1970, Earth Day. And then July 9th, 1970, Nixon established the EPA.
Okay, the Environmental Protection Agency.
Yes.
Which, I mean, in modern times, doesn't seem to do that much.
No, but he was really pushing for it.
Yeah, I think Nixon pushed for a lot of things.
He did. But that's hired 4,000 people. He put like solar panels on the White House, had this whole like different heating system.
Okay.
I've talked about this before, I think. But yeah, he was like really for the environment, and he was conservative, I think.
Yeah, he was a Republican.
Yeah. So.
But 70s. It didn't. That's a good point. It didn't used to be a political issue.
Yeah.
It didn't used, or should I say, it didn't used to be a partisan issue. It didn't used to be if you're left, then you're for climate change. If you're right, then you don't believe in it. I mean, it used to just be a science thing.
Yeah.
And some big money interests have changed that, muddied those waters.
Yeah. Then there was. Do you know about the book or the study, The Limits to Growth?
The Limits to Growth.
Yes.
Is this about like the
population and the like food, like we're using resources too fast?
Malthus, you mean?
It's neo-Malthusian. So this was like they were looking at Malthus, who was saying no, population's growing too much, but that wasn't.
Yeah, it was before this.
Yeah.
So anyway, Malthus was this old guy who said, not old guy, but back in the past, before all this, said populations are getting too high.
And food's not going to catch up. This was before the Green Revolution.
Yeah, exactly. Population will get too high for resources. We're in for a bit of a disaster. That was his thing, right?
So in this guy, Dennis Meadows, or Denise Meadows, I don't know, did a study in like looking at the interaction between population and industrial growth, and they were like, the population's going to go so big that the environment's going to collapse. That happened in 1972.
Okay.
And then December 1972, December 31st, actually.
Okay.
New Year's Eve, the debates over DDT came to a head, and they actually banned it. And Rachel Carson had predicted this. Didn't say in here when, because like the reason the DDT eventually got banned was because it bioaccumulated and bald eagles, which are like America's birds, started.
That's funny.
The populations just like plummeted. Because what happened? Why were the bald eagles so affected?
Because they're eating fish.
Yes, and their shells. DDT broke down the.
DDT makes the shells thinner.
Yeah, so like the
offspring weren't surviving. Okay, yeah, and that's why birds and fish, because they both lay eggs. Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's like this population started dropping. They're like, why, where are all the bald eagles going?
And then Rachel Carson was like, I mean, she was dead, but the Rachel Carson estate was saying, we tried to tell you.
Yeah. And so I don't know when like the population started crashing, but I think it was around right when they banned it.
That's so gross though, that that's the thing that's the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah, when the bald eagles start going.
If the bald eagles start going, then we got to make a change now. Never mind all the ecosystem collapse and like the other issues, not to mention health issues, right? Human health issues.
Yeah, it was, I don't know if it was DDT, but there was some pesticide that they were finding in like baby teeth.
Yikes.
Yeah. So it's just like, it's not good.
Untested chemicals being sprayed all over the place. Yeah. Essentially. And people still haven't really learned the lesson, because we do it with other stuff now. Yeah. Anyway. So they finally banned DDT 10 years after Rachel Carson testified.
And that's 72. And then the next 8 years in the 70s, there was a ton of legislation going in about the environments, like the EPA. There was stuff on like water and air pollution.
Yeah, didn't they have the first ever UN
conference on climate change?
Yeah, climate change conference in the 70s?
Yes.
Yeah.
And in 83, there was the Brundtland Commission, where they all got together to kind of like define sustainability, and that's when sustainability came into vogue. Okay. But after that, there was just a ton of things happening.
I see.
I don't know if that's
all kind of goes by in a blur.
Yeah. Probably could go into more detail about that another time. Yeah. Because today was more about Rachel and the DDT.
Yeah. Just going back into Rachel Carson, why do you think it would be important to... Because I didn't know about her until I knew about the book Silent Spring.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know who wrote it. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know she testified, Congress, DDT, any of that really. The extent of my knowledge before we started looking her up for this episode was she was a person who wrote a book about preservation, and it kind of started the environmental movement.
Yeah.
Now I know obviously a lot more about that, and that was kind of right but kind of wrong at the same time. Why do you think it'd be important to let more people know about her when she is no longer alive? Like, why is that important?
I feel like she lived out a really good example of what it means to like sacrifice for the cause.
That's interesting.
Because it's not that she didn't want to. Like, she wanted people to know and be aware about the impacts of DDT.
Of course.
But it was compromising her own, like, she wasn't doing something that made her super, super happy. It was just she was doing the work.
Yeah, I mean, it's near the end of her life.
Yeah.
A big political, storm. I mean, and having studies as a scientist, so not exactly being ready for Congress and anything, things like that. That's very admirable, I think.
Yeah, I agree. But it's also interesting to see she just loved the environment, and I wish I had more of a, not like I love the environment, but more of a
scientific curiosity.
Yeah, like
That's
you were saying, people are like looking up bird calls in class. It's like,
yeah, I've been thinking about
I
that.
would love
my own
to.
kind of scientific interests.
Yeah.
Because being in environmental science, you're in sustainability, which is
Mm-hmm.
like the kind of more social program. I'm in the strictly scientific one, and it does kind of bother me. Well, just talking about the program, there aren't too many actual environmental science courses.
Mm-hmm.
So something like Rachel Carson would have been writing about, there aren't too many things like that.
Yeah.
A lot of the courses are either computer-y, software-y courses, which are I consider completely separate,
Mm-hmm.
or they are more social problem-solving kind of type thing. But then I say that, but even the environmental classes, I find I don't love it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm interested in animals, plants, nature, and that kind of sense of wonder. Watching nature documentaries and being outside and that kind of thing, learning about more species. But it's not something that I myself would be writing books on. Let's say that.
Yeah.
So that's why I admire Rachel Carson and scientists like that, I think.
Yeah, they're just like studying nature because they love it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really great. I love when people do things that they love and are good at.
Well, it's a sense of like pure scientific curiosity, which was later used for good.
Yeah.
I think she kind of well exemplifies that interdisciplinary nature to sustainability that we talk about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But also, the main reason I think it would be important to spotlight people like this, people like Rachel Carson, is because, as we've said numerous times in different episodes, movements really go well with faces and people to get behind.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like people need role models.
Yeah.
And there aren't a ton of environmental role models.
No, there really aren't.
We know about, yeah.
That we know about. Because a lot of them, I guess, have been scientists who usually aren't the most public personas. That's probably why.
Yeah, she's probably one of the most public ones, and we still don't know too much about her.
Yeah, for sure. So did we want to talk about that kind of contrast or growth from the environmental movement of the 60s and 70s to where we are today?
We could. There's like a lot that happened.
I don't mean the in-between. I mean just...
Oh, just the contrast?
Yeah,
okay.
just kind of a before and after.
Yeah.
If we tried to summarize the last 40 years, I think that'd be difficult.
Yeah, I think so as well.
When I say 40, I mean 50, 60.
Yeah.
I got my numbers
wrong. So you just
there.
want to contrast, like...
The 2020 environmentalist to, let's say, the 1968 environmentalist.
Yeah, cool. So I think back then there were like 3 environmentalists, and now everybody's an environmentalist.
Okay.
To an extent, like you know what I mean.
There were 3:
Everyone's
Rachel
doing their
Carson,
part.
David Suzuki, and Richard Nixon. Apparently.
So there's those guys, but now it's like every CEO, every company is.
I don't think we're there yet.
They're not environmentalists, but they're claiming to be. They're.
Okay.
I
mean about the real environmentalists.
Okay.
But I mean, what you were saying is that it's a bigger thing in society people do know about it more, whether or not they're really
That's what I meant.
whether or not they're really into it. Everyone knows about it, and it's kind of socially proper to be sustainable.
Yeah.
I think the reason I just wanted to make this comparison is because I find it interesting that among modern environmentally minded youth, especially on campuses, the 60s and 70s fashion is very in.
Yeah.
I think I find that interesting. Billowy pants, flowery t-shirts,
Okay.
round glasses.
So you just wanted to make the comparison?
Your thoughts?
My thoughts? I think the kind of like hippie movements, the
The hippie movement. Granola.
Yeah. I think that's kind of becoming the aesthetic of sustainability.
Yeah.
Is like, looking back at the 70s and 60s and being like, they knew what was going on. They were trying to be more sustainable, and then it just fell off a cliff. And that kind of is the case, but also they didn't know, like, the science back then wasn't as extensive and available and understood.
So maybe they were operating more out of just a stick it to the man kind of thing.
It's kind of what it seemed like, or even just like it was just the hip thing.
There's definitely a part of that.
Yeah.
As
but there is today, yeah. I think
the average environmentalist is more informed?
Yeah.
I would say that.
I think so. Because you could ask anyone about, like, even DDT, and they'd be like, oh yeah, that, like, killed the bald eagles.
But I do think there are parallels to be made when you see pictures of environmental protests, Greenpeace protests, people in the streets, in the parks, at festivals, that kind of thing back then, to protests today, climate marches, viral campaigns about, be it Australia burning or a rainforest or something like that. I do think things are quite similar.
The tone and the...
Yeah. Just the way it looks. More people involved now, as you were saying. But
the message hasn't changed.
The message hasn't changed, and maybe even the response from governments hasn't changed that much.
Hasn't changed.
Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, or they've kind of become numb to the...
Let's hope not.
I don't know.
Numb to that kind of clamor for environmental action?
Yeah.
Let's hope not.
We can hope not.
I mean, the problem, the best way forward still is voting. Between that period of the 60s and 70s to now, there still haven't been too many big environmental wins in politics.
Yeah.
Still the biggest corporations are big polluters. There's still big campaigns about unsafe chemicals being used, ecosystems, species, natural disasters. So I don't know. I don't know if things are that different.
But I genuinely feel like in the 70s, the government was responding with what they knew, and because they...
The U.S. government, you mean?
The U.S. government, yeah. And I think Canada was pretty similar. But just enacting regulations on pollution, banning and lead from cars.
So you think it's actually gone worse?
The things that they were dealing with are easier, like the ozone hole.
True.
They had to just ban.
True. They still weren't doing much about emissions, you mean?
No. But it's it wasn't as big of an... it was a big issue, but it wasn't as...
Well, it wasn't as pressing.
Yeah.
It wasn't as... It was more optimistic.
Yeah.
So they were cool, we're getting a grip on this.
Yeah.
And now
but
we're
then it just kind of... One of the presidents came in, they were took the...
Yeah, Reagan. Yeah.
Just kind of... upheavaled everything.
It was the kind of politicizing of it.
Yeah.
The entrenching of it as a political topic.
The dismissing of people as hippies, just being no, they're just a hippie.
True. Big money interests getting involved and really exerting their influence on politics, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
To where we
did
are
all
today.
That research about the Arctic warming, and then they covered it all up, and yeah, I feel when corporations got involved, it kind of went
south. So on that positive note, shall we end the episode?
I think so.
Or shall we end on something actually positive? For instance, our group project, which we began today in one of our classes.
Yes, the groups were assigned, and we got assigned into a group together.
Speaking of scientific curiosity, we're doing a fun research project to be announced because we haven't decided it yet.
Yeah, we're going to really push for something about curriculum and sustainability.
I think that would be cool.
I think it would be as well.
Really kind of invoke the spirit of Rachel Carson.
Yeah. Any last words?
Just that I guess I'm kind of... Firstly, I'll thank you because you did a lot of research about her, about Rachel Carson, her life and her published works and her research and her later in life advocacy and even her personal life. So I've been thankful over the course of this podcasty time to learn about someone who I didn't really know much about.
Cool. So you can find us on Instagram at @the_environmental, where we post videos and different visual content kind of reflecting the message of that week and just our thoughts, our creative ideas.
Yeah, and we have new episodes every Monday, new podcast episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. We just started this biography series. I think it's really cool. We might pick it up again in a few weeks, but in the meantime, next week, I think it's going to be something else really interesting, which we have not decided yet.
Yeah. Tune in.